Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, and we are going to do part three of Alchemy and the Eastern Traditions with Sheldon Moore. Hey Sheldon, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All
So I
right.
thought before we queue up the slide presentation, I'll just kind of give everybody an overview. I'm sorry that it's taken three. Basically, we had to break this up into three different presentations, but it's important information, and it's not really, it doesn't do its justice if we just gloss over it really quickly and try to condense this all into like 1 hour. It really should probably be 10 programs where Jay and I are sitting under a pine tree somewhere and we're just talking slow and going easy. But we're trying to get this into kind of a three-part series now. And so today we're going to be able to finish up everything and kind of show you what some of our, what I believe, what some of the ancients were telling us. And I think they were better astronomers than we think. Definitely way better astronomers and astrologers. But I think they were had higher spiritual practices that we should reconsider and look at again because the proof is kind of there, and hopefully by within the next hour or so we can kind of show you that proof.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And by the way, the next lunar eclipse is on March 14th. So that will be pertinent to what we're discussing here, especially today. And um, and now we're going to go.
So hopefully,
Note
is
the
this on your
calendar spelled right.
I like how people get kind of mean with things like that. It's I think I spelt or pronounce I was taught, I used to work in high tech, and I was taught years ago that you can give information three times as fast, and people can receive it and retain it the same way as if you just talk at normal speed. So that's why I'm trying to talk faster during these presentations to get it, because there's so much stuff to cover. But you start pronouncing words incorrectly, and don't do your spelling check before you start your presentation. So hopefully this last one we can kind of go slow and give everybody a kind of a better view of what's going on here.
I listen to all my YouTube videos at 1.5 speed.
Yeah, yeah, because you can. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand
So
it completely, and it goes by about 20 minutes, an hour goes by in 40 minutes. So why not?
yeah. So just to give you a quick recap, out of the laws of Manu, and it's definitely this document that the Indians have. I'm almost certain came from the Anunnaki because Manu, Anu, and the only way you can start monitoring 24,000 year cycles is you have to be an ancient race. You have to be like we don't have even the Australian Aborigines who go back 80,000 years do not have a recorded history where they can see these cycles, where they actually can see a 24,000 year Yuga cycle, let alone a 4.32 million year Yuga cycle.
Well, I
So,
mean, Cro-Magnon emerged about 24,000 years ago.
yeah, yeah. And it's based on a binary, so it's between our sun up here and a brown dwarf, which I believe is it's not a red dwarf. I don't think it's ignited because we got such a long period, a 24,000 year period. To give you an example, in the closest star to us is everybody knows Alpha Centauri and Beta Centauri, and they're only like 4.5 light years away, and they're almost the same. The alpha and beta are almost the same size, so their perihelion is only 100 years. So they do their little thing every 100 years. Ours does its thing every 2,400 years because they're not the same size suns. They're very different sizes.
24,000.
Yeah, 24,000. And I always thought the 000 is probably not right. And just doing this show with you, I kind of figured out why they didn't give it like 24,128 years or whatever it is. And I think that the speed is not always exactly the same on each cycle. If you, because we're not just moving between a binary like this. Like, I'll give you an example. If this is our binary star system here, so when they're furthest apart, that's called aphelion, and when they come in, it's called perihelion. And when as they come in, that's the golden age. So as these stars are closer together, you have a golden age, and when they go back out, to the furthest part is when you have your dark age. So when we were in our dark age that we're just leaving down here is when those two stars, our sun and its twin, were the furthest apart. And a lot of people will go like, that's crazy. We're not in a binary system. At least 85% of all suns in the whole galaxy, plus all of the hundreds of billions of galaxies, are binary. The closest one to us, Alpha Centauri and Beta Centauri, they're not just a binary, they've got a third Proxima Centauri that goes around every 500,000 years. So imagine trying to do the Yuga cycle for that. You got Beta and Alpha doing a 100-year sort of cycle, and then you got another star going around every 500,000 years. It's like a totally different Yuga cycle. So these cycles, ours is a 4-3-2-1, which means our golden age is 4 times as long as a dark age. So you have a rising arc and then you have a descending arc. We're right here. We're right at the cusp. We're leaving this buffer zone between the two Yuga cycles. And this is what everybody's feeling. This is what we were trying to tell you in our last everybody's feeling this. Everybody knows something's happening, but they don't really know what. And it's this, because we're going from mental virtue in the dark ages at 25%. So dual mental virtue, which means goodness basically, is really low in a dark age. And when we cross this line over here, we go into 50%. So it basically doubles. It started happening in the 1700s, but we're going to hit this line, I believe, this year, next year. Like, I think we're close. It's hard to really know exactly with these calendars, but we're in the zone now. That's what everybody's feeling. And so if you can imagine when the sun, what creates these demarcation points, this is plasma. It's plasma between these two stars. And so because they have actual where you change a Yuga cycle, there's a bit of I guess you could say light resistance or plasma resistance, and that's what we're punching through. That's why we're getting all this strange weather, these strange events all the time. And they're not just from burning gas like our governments want us to believe. It's cars doing all of these weird, you got to pay more carbon taxes. It's the sun is changing. Our sun used to be yellow when I was a kid, and it's bright white now. You can hardly look at it. The sun is changing as well. And I imagine once we get up into this next exchange, there'll be weird weather again. There'll be other things happening. And that's what we're punching through this zone right now. And that's why you hear all these weird sounds emanating from the earth. We've had 2 major tsunamis in the last, 2006 and 2011. Your great-grandparents and your great-great-great-great-grandparents never saw that, but we saw it. And it's because we're punching through right here. I'm certain of it. That's what's going on.
I agree completely.
Yeah. So now I want to go, because I shared with everybody last time that Buddha had a secret teaching. He had a hidden teaching, and it was in the Kalachakra Tantra, and the Gnostics knew this, I believe. The Egyptians knew this. And I want to show everybody how all these different cultures knew this same teaching, but I think it kind of emanated from different places. And it's kind of like you said, it comes out of that stream, that slipstream of consciousness that we can all access. And all of these sites now that you see from all the way from Göbekli Tepe, if you go down into the ones in Egypt, like in Armenia, they're about 7,000 years old. That one in Alberta, the Canadian Stonehenge, is 5,000 years. We got a 5,000-year device on the prairies of Alberta that's on the exact same latitude as Stonehenge. Most people don't realize Stonehenge is on 51 degrees latitude. And you got to be within a half a degree of 51 degrees latitude to get exactly 90-degree angles from your midsummer, so you can basically see equinoxes with absolute precision. You can only do that at Stonehenge, but you can also do it at this site in Alberta. It's exactly on 51-degree latitude as Stonehenge is, and the outer rings are the same size. So you can't tell me there's not some connection with whoever built Stonehenge to whoever showed these people on the prairies, because it's not a medicine wheel. Natives used to build these medicine wheels to celebrate great chiefs and great hunts. This one's different. This one's another arithmetical ground calculator, like Stonehenge, like Göbekli Tepe. They're all used for doing astronomy, but really complex astronomy. And so as we tick up through all these different sites, I want to show you how I believe that Göbekli Tepe is the master one. This is the one that has all the information. And they did something on that site so that we would have better astronomy and better astrology again at this time, I believe. I think that this, like you call them monuments of memory, they left some memories there that we probably aren't going to figure out for a long time yet, but you will by the end of today. Like there's some really important stuff that we're going to cover on that one. So we talked about this plasma universe and how we're connected to the universe at the soul level, your soul within, which is basically a light orb. We all have this God spark or Buddha nature within. That's an orb. It's like a ball. The causal body is like a ball of light, basically, and enters the body. So the universe affects that. But the thing to understand is it's the universe, like the different stars out there, affect consciousness, and that's what basically astrology is all about. We know how the Yuga cycle is affected in a binary system. That's the only way you can have a Yuga cycle is with a binary. You can't really have that cycle any other way because plasma affects consciousness, and the two stars you're around are probably the two objects in your locale that affect you the most. And then the second would be the stars out in the that you're creating quantum entanglements with. So all of the stars, everything affect you. And also eclipses, when the alignments, when our sun and our moon and our earth is in a perfect alignment like this, where you have the sun, the earth, and the moon in a perfect alignment, there's like that string that you see there, that's a plasma tunnel. So when you have eclipses, there's a very strong magnetic electric / plasma event that occurs that we don't really understand, but it affects your wind channels. So the Pingali and the Ida, the wind channels, are also masculine and feminine. So that's what's kind of happening, why they built a lot of these sites, because they wanted to know when eclipses were going to happen, but they also wanted to do all this other basically astrology that we forgot about. So I told everybody about this hidden teaching that Buddha gave. It's in the Kalachakra Tantra. This is a document that's roughly 60,000 shlokas, which are like verses. So it's pretty big. It's not as big as the Mahabharata, but it's bigger than the Bible. It's a big document. And it had everything in it. It had the interworkings of atoms. It had this calendar system, which is, I think, the calendar we're talking about now, but we don't have the full document, so we can't really cross-reference that. And it had the ability to predict eclipses to infinity. They had mathematics for predicting eclipses. And in Shambhala, they only did the higher esoteric tantra practices during total lunar eclipses. So the higher tantric practices only happened during that time, and there was a reason for that. And we kind of went through that, but the Buddha nature, or your soul, basically is at your soul seat, and this is the sort of the position most people are in, and you got to be able to switch that polarity to the top to gain enlightenment, but it also has to flip. And the only way you can get this positive and negative effect on your soul is through the development of love. And the only way you can really stop your mind and let it just rest freely is the development of the wisdom mind, or gnosis. That's why gnosis is so important. It's not just having a bunch of borrowed information, but when you really truly understand emptiness, which is or sunyata, as they say in Vedic literature, your mind is no longer making distinctions. So as long as the mind is choosing between this and that, or it's making opinions or making distinctions, it doesn't stop naturally. That's the problem with the human mind. And the first thing we try to do with meditation is we try to stop the mind with the mind, and we're in a paradox. And that's, some people spend 10 years fighting their mind with the mind, and they don't go anywhere with their meditations. You got to let it just stop naturally. And that's where I say, grow a garden, live in nature, zen out in nature. Nature helps the mind stop quicker. But also, if you not just understand emptiness, but you truly understand the problem with the mind making distinctions, you'll stop your mind a lot sooner. So So you need to understand the mechanics of enlightenment so you apply the right technique. And you see there's this red moon up here. That's the timing of it. Total lunar eclipse. We lost that a long time ago. They knew it though. They all knew it. So love and wisdom and timing and technique. Understand those four things and you'll be a master of your own destiny. And the love and the wisdom, that's just part of developmental growth. And the timing and technique is understanding eclipses. And then the technique is understanding why you have to do those more advanced yoga type meditations, not just sort of sitting there, but where you're actually moving that life force through your chakra systems and learning to rotate it like you would do in the Secret of the Golden Flower type of meditation, where you're actually taking that Buddha nature and you're rolling it forward in your breathing practice. And that helps as well, because it's got to go below the root chakra, like right below, and then turn and then come up. It's kind of like you're stuck on your Shushanam or your spinal column, moving that energy up and down. And that's where Buddha left the clue. Buddha almost gave up and was dying when he attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And Wei Nong, who is the famous Chan master, he was just like 13 years old and he was hauling firewood. So he was physically exhausted, and he heard a line of a sutra and he became enlightened at like 12 or 13 years old. He was really young. He wasn't educated. He had no practice. He just, like, it was his time. He was one of those old souls. So the subtle body or the causal body is really the seed. It's seen as the core of the soul. And then you often see how they project 7 bodies across in a lot of these diagrams. It's probably not really the best way to look at it, because it's not like bodies stacked on bodies. It's the subtle body, or the causal body is more like this orb that you see up in digital photography that attaches at the soul seat. And these other bodies, the causal body represents 2 of them, and the subtle body, which is really your light body or your astral body, represents the other 3. And in most schools, they don't really talk about the cosmic body or the nirvanic body, the 6th and 7th body, because you punch through that before enlightenment. So those aren't even, until you're enlightened, those other 2 bodies really aren't even in the practice or discussed much in terms of teachings and stuff like that, because that's the last bit, and it was when you punch through and become enlightened, basically. So each one of these chakras correlates with a certain frequency, and the Egyptians and the Tibetans knew this. That's why they used the singing bowls in Tibet to open up those chakras. And I believe the ancient Egyptians used the ankh with that steel rod, and they touched their lips on it, kind of like if you touch a tuning fork on your lips, you'll feel the vibration go right down your spine. They were doing the similar thing with the ankh. I'm certain of it. I haven't found this in a document anywhere, but I'm almost certain that that's what that was used for. So it must go below, and this is the thing that if you start trying to move this life force around, or you're trying to turn it all the time, when you're finally doing your final practice in a lunar eclipse, you want to have the mind played out, and you want to be able to allow it to just sink naturally without trying to push it with the mind, and then rotate it forward, and it'll come up, and you're permanently locked in, and you know the bliss, perpetual bliss, is what'll happen after that. So shift it, but it's also when you shift it and how you shift it. So these past Buddha and Wei Nong left probably the most important clues on that. Just tire yourself out.
This is essentially tantra. I mean,
Yeah, yeah. And we're going to get into that. You'll like that, because we're going to cover that in here in a minute here. So this is the cool thing, Jay. This one's going to blow you away. And so one of the things I noticed when I started looking into the Egyptian stuff is just how much more the Gnostics knew about these other realms compared to what the Buddhists did. Because Buddhists saw these realms. He saw these 6 realms. These are the six realms in Buddhism, where you have a god realm, a demigod realm, the human realm, animal realm, and you have the hungry ghost realm, and then the hell realm. And depending on your karma, it depends on, are you going down or are you going up? Are you doing the right things in life or are you doing the wrong things? And this Archon looking guy, the Yama, he looks over the wheel, and they call it six realms. There's only six realms in Buddhism. But what they forget to tell you is, you got to remember, Buddha had parinirvana. So after he attained enlightenment, when he passed, he just went away. He's never coming back. He's never going to have an incarnation on another world. He went back to the great center. So they forget about this little realm that you see up in the corner here, where this is the seventh heaven. So this is the same as the Gnostic seventh heaven, or what the other Egyptians, Hermes Trismegistus said the same thing. All of they're talking. The seventh realm is this little realm up here. So when you hear the whole story, I won't go into the whole story of the Bhavacakra today, but they talk about the Buddha up in the corner here. See how there's a Buddha pointing? They say the Buddha represents enlightenment itself. So he's the path to enlightenment. But the moon, where he's pointing to, represents enlightenment itself. And now if you look at all these Bhavacakra paintings in the old monasteries, some of the newer ones don't include it because they don't know the clue, right? This is where they hid the clue in the art. And the Egyptians did the exact same thing. If you start looking at the old paintings, you'll see this moon up here. See the orange color, Jay? It's got the total lunar eclipse looks to it. A couple of them even show where you can actually see the eclipse occurring. They left that in the Bhavacakra. That's why the moon represents enlightenment itself, because they knew about the timing and they hid it. They knew we were going into the dark age because the original Bhavacakra was made by Buddha, the original drawing. And so he had his whole teaching in this drawing, but he hid the important part, the last two steps. And I believe that he must have felt that we would figure this out when we came out of the dark age. Because it's right there, like you can see it. It's in. Go look at the old. I went through all the old monasteries like Somye, wherever these paintings are, and they knew this. The Tibetans know so much more than we think they know. They knew all of this stuff.
Oh yeah, Norbu Namkai, the famous Tibetan scholar, he talks openly about how the Tibetans came from Lemuria, and
Yeah,
a series of islands that are between Australia and India, and so yeah, they know a lot.
yeah, and that's actually a good point to bring up. Is when we come back into perihelion, which happened 13,500 years ago. That's a kind of a difficult time, right? Because you have our twin coming in. It's probably bringing in comets and all kinds of debris with it, and they go around each other. So wherever our planet is, it changes every time. Sometimes you might not get too much problems, and sometimes you would get a lot of problems, and you might get just a partial, not a pole shift where you go right from one side to the other side, but you just slightly tip, and that would be enough if you were Lemuria or Atlantis along the bulge, which they were in warm areas. They think Atlantis was like around Bimini, and Lemuria was over more towards India. Being in the bulge spot would be the worst spot on the planet if you just even did a slight shift, because that bulge would move. So you would, I think that's why there's that pyramid in around Cuba that's so deep in the water. It's deeper than the water's never retreated that far, but we got a pyramid that shouldn't be that deep in the water. And I think that it might be some crustal displacement in the last perihelion.
Well,
So
uh, once you lose, 250 feet of water, um, there's a giant landmass in the Pacific.
yeah,
Florida is twice as big as it is, and it's connected to Bermuda. Um,
yeah.
about a lot of land could appear really quickly. So,
And another thing that would happen is where your poles are at that time, when it shifts to the other angle, you now have a new pole. So where the old ice sheet was, it would melt really quickly. So you'd get a flood. And I think that's kind of what might have happened 13,500 years ago is we probably had plasma exchanges, we probably had comets, like you said, the cross of Henday, all these different multiple events. We would have probably had probably more than two. We probably would have had three. I think we would have had some major plate movements as well.
I think that I don't know about pole shifts, but I mean the pole is moving. But I think that uh, I think the Earth literally moved about 40 degrees, and that
Yeah,
the land that used to be Antarctica under the pole and
yeah,
caused the ice to build really quickly. And that's why we have the Pure East map, which shows Antarctica as two different islands, which it is. And
yeah,
but it's covered with ice. And so whoever built that map knew Antarctica before this event.
yeah. Yeah, that map is another one of those things. It's just like, where did that come from? Like it's it has to be from that ancient world, right? There's no way we would have known because there's been ice there for at least, like 12,000 years.
Probably about
So
12,000 years, yeah.
yeah,
I would think it could build up pretty fast. It's pretty cold there. The altitudes are really high. The South
yeah,
Pole, 7,000 feet in altitude. People
yeah,
don't realize that. It's way up there.
yeah. So this I'm going to talk on this section about. We talked about the six realms in Buddhism, but how they have that seventh heaven, or where peri-nirvana is, where the great ones go, where it's just pure white light, where we're all apparently supposed to eventually get to. But the um, the stuff that came out of Egypt, especially what the Gnostics were following, and the Hermetics type stuff, they had a better explanation of these realms. They call it the seventh heavens, like the seven heavens. So they got the six, and then they got the peri-nirvana one, which they call the seventh heaven. But they don't just talk about it as a realm. They actually show how it's linked with the planets. So it's not just it's that other realm is based on these globes, but it's connected between the moon, the Earth, Jupiter. It goes all the way out to Saturn. So that other realm that we talk about, it's not just bound to this Earth, but it's in our solar system. And the I think the Gnostics were correct on how it's connected to all these different planets in our solar system. And I've always wondered, why does Saturn have that weird hexagonal shape at the top? And I wonder, like, it looks more like an antenna firing energy out somewhere out into space, like it's got the dish rings and everything. If it's somehow connected to, because I believe the negative forces, the archons, only come in during dark ages,
Yeah.
and the Gnostics were teaching that seventh realm, or it's going to all collapse at some point. They were
Well,
very,
Saturn is a machine.
yeah,
Okay. It's a machine. It's two tetrahedrons interlocked and they're spinning.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that creates the hexagon on the South Pole. And the reason that there's like a Eye of Sauron at the North Pole is because that's one of the tips of the tetrahedrons is touching that, or not touching
yeah,
it, causing cloud patterns to shift and change.
yeah.
And
I'm
it's a
just wondering
control
if that
mechanism.
machine,
It's a control mechanism.
yeah.
Um like an
It's like a matrix overlay. I,
yeah.
I see it as a matrix overlay, but it seems to disappear. The Gnostics knew this, that it disappears when we leave the Dark Age. Now, I don't know if the Archons are gone next month or next year. They might be around for another 40 or 400 years. At some point in Dwapara Yuga, though, I think that their time stops.
I agree.
When that is, it's anybody's guess. Maybe somebody in the comment section will know this better than I do, but it's kind of guesswork, right? When it actually happens. But
Just
it's,
just know that the that when the forces against the archons increase, the archons just make everybody go even crazier. So
yeah,
as they're being pulled away, they're
yeah,
getting they're slapping you and trying to do anything they can to
Yeah.
affect the situation in a negative way.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's so much focus right now in Western governments on misinformation and disinformation. They want to control speech because they know that we're getting smarter and they want more control. But I don't think it's going to work.
It's
I
too
think it
late.
might be ugly for another few years, but I don't think they're going to win this one.
Yep.
The universe is not with them.
Yep.
And we're the ones who are supposed to change it. Like the Jewish rabbis say, heaven comes to earth. Part of this is about we bring heaven to earth, kind of in a way. Like the Garden of Eden is already here. Look outside. Every time I live in BC, you live in the Colorado Rock. The garden is already here. It's us that are not really in sync with what we could be doing here yet. So it's kind of the ball's in our court in some ways.
Yeah, it was like the what was it called? Avatar depression syndrome. Right after
Yeah.
Avatar came out, all these people started going to psychiatrists and saying how depressed they were because they don't live in what, Pandora.
Yeah, it's
Like,
like
heck
I
there, what are
live
you talking about? Open the
I know
door.
I live in BC. I just have to look out on the lake right now. There's Pandora's right there. It's like,
It's
I know it's
everywhere.
funny. Humans are funny,
They are.
but so just so that people understand, this is from a sutra from China. Most sutras are usually directly from Buddha, but this is a Chinese sutra, and it states that during lunar eclipses, one can accomplish the highest attainments. And during solar eclipses, total ones, you can accomplish the highest, medium, and lowest. Like I always found the with the lowest attainments. And I think the other side of I've always known this. This is why they put so much fear around solar eclipses in the past. It magnifies universal energy. So if you have everybody fooled thinking that there's a dragon eating the sun or you got to get into a place of fear, you magnify that thousands of times. That's what happens when these plasmic objects, because the sun is plasma, the earth is really charged plasma, and so is the moon. When they're in alignment, things kind of change. That really does happen, whether you believe it or not. It does, and the ancients knew this. I didn't just make this stuff up. And it's really it's remember how I told you the five aura electricities that make up the causal body that Shirikshwara identified that said we wouldn't be able to measure them until Treta Yuga, like another 2,400 years. The masculine of the wind channel and the feminine, it's a polarity that we don't understand. It's that subtle energy that we just can't quite measure yet, but it's there just the same. So what happens is one side is masculine and the other side is feminine. And when the moon, which is feminine, and the sun, which is masculine, are in perfect alignment, it creates a tunneling effect. It cancels out the Shushanam and the resistance of the wind channels so that Buddha nature, that orb within, can rise up.
The
That's what's happened.
Sushumna.
The Shushumna, yeah. So it cancels out that masculine and feminine. And in
Tantric.
Vedic astrology or in the Kalachakra, it's opposite. They see the moon as masculine and they see the sun as feminine, but most Vedic and Western astrologers see the moon as feminine and the sun as masculine.
Right.
So I don't know why it's different in the Kalachakra. I've tried to figure that out. I just can't. It's And the interesting thing is, you mentioned this last time, Jay, whereas the Egyptians had different names for the subtle body, the causal body, and the gross physical body. I wonder if they have names for the Pingala and the Ida, because they clearly knew about this. I'll show you how they hit it in their art, but they knew this. I wonder what the names were. If whatever book you read, you might be able to find that out.
I'll look into it.
Yeah. And in the Kalachakra Tantra, they say that during a solar eclipse that universal energy magnifies 10,000 times, and during a lunar eclipse it magnifies 1,000 times. So the Tibetans knew this. all the masters from China, they knew this. This was known in our ancient past. And those esoteric tantra practices, which were the higher Vajra type practices, which sometimes involved the sexual union where the man and women can work together to change that polarity, um, they only did them during total lunar eclipses. That's the only time they did those. And they called the Pingala, and they called them Nadi and Bindu. So they had different names for the wind channels, but the same thing. So the Dakinis, which are
Teeny.
Dakinis, sorry, are they call them sky goddesses, but they say they came from the sky, but they in Shambhala they did only perform those higher tantric practices during those eclipses. So that's why they're all over Tibet, Stonehenge type devices. They found them in Mongolia. They found them all over the place.
Because watching for the eclipses is the most important thing of all.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny how we just kind of lost that, but so they and what they were doing is they were tracking those nodal points of the moon really carefully. So above the moon and below the moon, there's Rahu and Ketu, and when the sun goes through those either one of those paths, that's how you can tell when a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse is going to occur. And I think even if you look at all the holy days in Judaism, they're all on new moons and full moons. And that's the only time eclipses can occur. So, way back when, they knew this even in Judaism. The Gnostics knew this. And that's why they had those were holy days, because they knew that eventually there's going to be an eclipse at one of those points. So, we make that a holy day, right? There's more to a lot of these holy days in different religions than we think. And the only difference is they call them Rahu and Ketu in Vedic astrology, and in the Kalachakra Tantra, they call them Rahu and Caligni. So they use different, slightly different names, but they were monitoring the same point. And and in the Kalachakra Tantra, eclipses are treated as holy days. We try to put fear out, omens, there's all kinds of silly things around. They treat them as holy days. There's a reason why they treated them as holy days. Because they knew, right? This was a higher civilization than they knew more than we know right now, basically.
So basically, they knew that eclipses um, are like control valves on the plasma energy, and that you can
Yeah,
use that. That one
yeah,
moment, that slight moment when the obstruction happens, there's like an opening, and they
yeah,
can use that, but to reverse the chakras.
yeah,
Take the lower chakra and bring it up to the top.
yeah,
By the way, that's also in alchemy on full moons. The water in the oak tree goes all the way out to the edge of the branches because it's like gravitational pull is pulling
yeah,
water up out of the ground, and that's when you're supposed to tap the sacred water that's inside the oak tree.
yeah. And you know, that's exactly what. Remember when you told the story about the guy with the pendulum and it started acting funny during the eclipse?
Yep.
When when you actually, if people start sitting under total lunar eclipses like this one in March, just pay attention and you'll feel a pulling sensation from the top of your head. You'll actually feel it. Like it won't be your imagination. You'll actually feel it because that's how it works. Like there's more to to what's going on there than you think. So
All right, everybody, on March 14th, coming up here soon,
yeah,
a month or so from now, uh, I want to hear everybody come and report here on what you experienced. I want to know.
yeah. So you mentioned Tantra just a minute ago, and I thought it was important to talk about this because most people don't realize that a lot of monks who weren't that didn't give vows, they did these higher Tantra teachings, and it delivered a lot of results. Basically, a lot of enlightened people in Tibet were from these higher tantric paths, and it's kind of abused in the West. Where if you I'll give you an example. If you go to the I'm going to say it wrong, Mingma school, which is the very first Tibetan Buddhist school. They'll take you through. You have to master the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana schools. So you have to the three major schools, and then they have six inner and outer tantras that you have to master. And one of those is Tumo, which is where you can sit out in the cold and you generate the fire belly. That can take years and years of practice. And the highest one is the Dzogchen teachings, which emanate from the second Buddha, not even Buddha Shakyamuni. And so they have some pretty high teachings that you have to learn. It's not this easy stuff that you see in California where they want your credit card and they get you into tantra practices the next day. There's a lot more to it to master tantra than what we get in the West, sort of. So just
Well,
kind of look at it from a
what's really important about Dzogchen is that it's, according to Norbu Namkai, it is a combination of the Bon tradition and the
yeah,
Buddha tradition. And the
yeah,
Bon tradition, Norbu says, is the tradition that came from Lemuria. So it was brought from Lemuria to Tibet in the Great Catastrophe, and
yeah,
uh, and they preserved it in Tibet, and now it's being dispersed all around the world.
yeah, yeah. And it's very. When you told me you were doing it in your house, I laughed, but I wasn't laughing that because I thought it was funny. I just couldn't believe that you were actually doing it in your house. So that's good. It was really good. So in the Tantra school, it's a little bit different. You remember how I explained you have the three pathways, your Shushumna region, and then your Pingala and Ida path. In the Tantra schools, they have six. So below the navel, there's three more. So they have three more paths below the navel. And because what they're doing in the divine union is the Buddha nature from an enlightened being can help assist the Buddha nature from a non-enlightened being, and they can pull that energy down in the embrace, rotate it forward, and then bring it back up. And so you can become enlightened. This is why they were doing these esoteric tantra practices in Shambhala. I'm going to say Dakinis. The Dakinis were doing it in Shambhala during total lunar eclipses, but because people were getting enlightened, there was a lot of the higher tantra practices were very useful, I think, back in our past. Just
I
be
would
careful because they're a bit abused in the West. Like you want to be really
say,
careful when you go to a tantra school,
yes, they
and
do. There's always one creep who tells you that he's an expert.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that divine union of the Yab Yum, they call it, where you see this figurine, you see it all over. It usually represents Padmasambhava, and one of the five white taras he had with him, I guess, in the embrace is what that usually represents. And they call them if it's a female tantra master, it's called a sangyam, and if it's a male, it's called a turton. So they have them for both, and the sexual energy is used to bring that Buddha nature down, flip it, and come up. But they do it in eclipses. So this is done in eclipses. And why I'm bringing this up right now is I think that Tantra can be really popular again, but maybe a loving partners, they can learn how to do this. And you know what I mean? Like it still has its place. It just, you want to be careful with it because it has been abused in the West. It shouldn't surprise anybody that it's been abused in the West.
Yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, it can actually hurt you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's you don't want to just, yeah, for sure.
yeah,
All of this stuff, Ken, it's like what I said, don't run out to the next eclipse trying all this stuff if you're still full of toxic anger and all these other things. You want your
right.
foundation right before you, you do this higher stuff. So now I want to show you how they hid this in Egyptian art as well. So we all know that Horus was seen as the sky god. Like I don't really know if Thoth or Horus or some of these people might have actually physically lived on the ground with people, and then it's kind of like we throw them into the sky later, right? To turn them into gods or whatever. But they left the clues about these eclipses in in this artwork of the Eye of Ra and the Eye of Horus. So the right eye of Ra represents the sun, and it represents logic and male vitality. So it's got the masculine and the feminine. They knew this. There's just no doubt about it. And the left eye, which represents the Eye of Horus, is feminine, and it represents the moon, and it represents feminine energy and creativity. So think about it. Like this is the story where it all connects. I think this is the most important thing I found to help connect some of this with what the Egyptians were saying is in Matthew 6:22. When I was reading Matthew, there's a famous quote where Jesus says, "Therefore thy eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light." Now he's talking about non-duality, bringing into your third eye. You're not seeing the world in duality, this and that. Your mind's stopped. The disease of the mind is stopped. But the whole body shall be full of light. He's talking about enlightenment. So, but I'm pretty certain that he got this information from the Essenes because both his parents were Essenes, apparently, and John the Baptist was an Essene. And the Essenes had this this teaching to help sleeping souls awaken. They knew about the timing. They knew about eclipses. I'm telling you, I know they knew. And how they knew is when I read that saying of Jesus about therefore the eye, it read like it was from another teaching. Like all of us are influenced by a past master, and I think that he was as well. And he was influenced by the Egyptian stuff. This wasn't Buddhist stuff so much. It was Egyptian. This was that knowledge that came out of Egypt. And the proper way to say it is, in ancient times, is when the cosmic eye of Horus is single, the whole body shall be full of light. Because if you look over here, what happens when the cosmic eye of Horus is single? It's a total lunar eclipse, and the whole body shall be full of light. This was part of the connection that they definitely knew in Egypt. Egyptians knew all of this. It's in their artwork. And we kind of missed it, right? Like it's the same teaching that the Buddha had. It's in the Kalachakra Tantra. It's the same thing. These guys are telling us right here. It's right there. And the pineal gland, everybody sees that. It's talking about the activation. Well, that's what happens when the cosmic eye of Horus is single. If you're doing the right technique, it's going to happen to you. They knew this in ancient Egypt. And I think it goes back to all the way to Thoth. And Thoth really goes back to like 6,000 to 6,500 BC. This is way before the pyramids were built or any of that other stuff. This goes back quite a ways, right?
Yeah, I learned a meditation technique from an alchemist, and what he said to do is breathe in, and as you breathe in, imagine the cosmic light, the plasma, is going
Yeah,
through your eyes. It hits the back of the eye, and as you breathe out, you shoot it out through your eyes. And you just do that over and over.
yeah.
Right. And I found that to be really powerful. And I'm going to do that on the next lunar eclipse.
Because you're bringing in prana, which is just like sweet plasma. I see prana and chi as just like sweet plasma. It's like that plasma that comes out of flowers and nature and the sun, but we need it. The soul needs it, right?
Oh
But
yeah,
so when you bring it in, you benefit from it.
that's super important.
So this is pretty important, right, to understand that the Egyptians knew this. Like I know they knew this in a greater detail than we think
Okay,
they did.
one other thing I want to say, and that is that Fulcanelli definitely points to Matthew and says that it's the most important gospel. And I'm thinking now, when I see this sentence, that that might be the reason.
I think it is. Actually, and I'm trying to be humble here, but I think it is. I think it is.
Yep.
So we don't really have these original emerald tablets of Thoth, but that moon shot or the moon crown represents that somebody who shifted that nature. And you can see that this thing that they hold all the time it has three little prongs at the bottom that I believe they just stuck in the sand and they lightly touched their lips to this device and tapped it with the ankh. And they probably had different types of ankhs. One that helped get the heart chakras unstuck. One might have been, like they would have had they would have rang at different tones, just like a Tibetan singing bowl, is my guess. So they knew about how to open up the chakras too. I'm just curious if you could find out what they actually called the Pingala, because I bet you they had a name for it. I know it's
They
there
did.
somewhere.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah,
They had the entire brain mapped out. They had the
yeah,
entire human anatomy mapped out. They knew everything. They knew
yeah,
everything. As
yeah,
Scholar de Lubit said, the Egyptians are 100,000 times past us, even right now.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Uh,
And because I think what happened was when we went into perihelion and we had several bad events, that probably the remnants from wherever Atlantis was went out, and they helped they tried to leave these monuments of memory. And then later, when the Egyptian sort of like from about 3000 BC to 500 BC, when most of the pyramids and stuff were built, that was later stuff. But there was something there a lot earlier, way before that. And I think that some of that information probably came from the people of Atlantis, or the Anunnaki left it with them, because the Anunnaki have got their fingerprints all over this.
oh no, the Anunnaki are a big part of this whole thing.
Yeah,
For, yeah, this is their science. Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
The calendar that I just shared, of the laws of Manu, that's Anunnaki. The a lot of these higher teachings about enlightenment obviously came from them as well. And
Yeah,
they
it was Enki. Enki gave the secrets of the Anunnaki to humans.
yeah,
Prometheus, a remnant memory of the same thing.
yeah,
Prometheus had to be tortured for 3,000 years or whatever for giving humans secrets. And the secret of alchemy is one of the Anunnaki um, is attracted to a beautiful woman in Egypt, Isis the prophetess, and
yeah,
he wants to have sex with her, and she's like, no, no. And then finally he begs her, and she says, okay, you got to tell me the secrets of alchemy. And that's how we understand alchemy. It came from Isis the prophetess, who was, having sex with one of the Anunnaki.
yeah.
Yep.
And I think at some point, even before Gobekli Tepe was built, that they kind of just let us be on our own, and they might have helped us still a bit with these monuments of memory, but they realized that we were great creators ourselves, and we could, we were doing art probably better than they were, the music, and I think they kind of just left us be at some point, and everybody took off during the Dark Age. They either went underground or they left the planet, is my belief. Nobody wanted to stay around for the coming Dark Age that we're just coming out of now.
It might be a little darker than you're saying. They may be using human beings for certain nefarious activities, and
Yeah,
the Dark Age hid their presence from us.
yeah,
But now that we're out of the Dark Age, out of the Kali Yuga, we're going to, they better be careful because we'll be able to see them now and whatever it
yeah,
is that they're actually doing to us. But I mean, how many UFO reports um, um, have there been where the UFO is literally stealing a cow out of a farmer's field, right?
yeah,
What about in India where they would leave cows in front of caves for the god?
yeah,
The next day the cow would be gone, right?
yeah,
So the Anunnaki's presence, and they like beef, by the way. The Anunnaki's presence is just kind of went underground. I think you're right. They
yeah,
kind of backed away from us. Um, but now they're actually getting a little bit worried that we're going to discover maybe some of the nefarious things that they've done. And so I think they may go away, actually.
yeah. I think they go away kind of probably around the same time the Archons go away. I think we're more powerful than they are. You see, you can come into a planetary system, do some DNA, make use some Neanderthals or some Cro-Magnon, or make a couple slaves kind of in your own image, but you can't guarantee where the souls are coming from. And I think that's where we're different. I think we're older at the soul level maybe than they even are, and I think they realize that our potential is probably great, and somebody else might be keeping them away from us a bit too. Like I
They're,
feel
they're,
like there's something else going on.
they're extremely jealous of us. And
Yeah,
and that's what the Tower of Babel is all about.
yeah,
Us accomplishing something beautiful and then them destroying it. Um, they they don't like beauty. Archons don't. And so they
yeah,
do everything they can to make the world uglier because
yeah,
that makes us more unhappy. And that's what they want. They want us to be unhappy. So it's
yeah,
very important that in your house or where you live, that you really make it beautiful. And
yeah,
beauty, truth, and love are the only things that you really need to nurture in this world.
yeah. That's what it says in the leaves of El Moray's garden as well. Like beauty, like that's the way we get out of this is create beauty,
That's
create
right.
lots of beauty.
Yep, I envision a world in the future of incredibly beautiful cities built in sacred geometric patterns, and
Gardens
the
and
buildings
yeah,
heal you, whereas our buildings make us sick. Forced
yeah,
air and uh,
yeah,
all the sun rays are being bifurcated by the windows, so you're only getting part of the rays of the sun coming into the office buildings, and
yeah.
they just make you sick.
So now, quickly, we'll just look at Vedic astrology for a little bit. Everybody knows about the sidereal zodiac, where they basically have divided it into 12 parts, just like the Western astrology. The only difference is they wait till the constellation completes. So it's not 12 perfectly square pies, even though it's represented that way in artwork. They wait till the constellation completes. And they also look at these um, nakshatras, there's 27. They call them the 27 sisters, but there's a 28th one missing, and this is the one that Krishna hid. So 5,125 years ago, Krishna hid a nakshatra, and it was called Abhijit, and it was the time of worship. And guess what, Jay? It was the only one that was masculine. So you have to ask you, the moon is feminine, the nakshatras are all based on the moon. How do you get one that's masculine? And it's quite easily to understand is when there's an alignment, when there's eclipses, they're in alignment. The sun will overpower the earth and the moon at that point. So you get a masculine one. That's why. So, and he hid it apparently because this took a lot of research because I wanted to know why did he hide it? Did he not want them to have this teaching? And apparently the Kauravas in the Kurukshetra war, they were more prepared and they had more troops and more, like they should have technically won the war. And Krishna was worried if they knew about the eclipses and this nakshatra that they might win because they would know about the magnifying capabilities of eclipse. And that's why they say he hid that nakshatra. And so there really was 20, because there's 28 lunar days in a month, not 27. It's 28. So why is there one missing? And this is what I found. So I believe Krishna knew this as well. He knew about eclipses and about the power that they and universe, how they magnify universal energy.
And
He was
I can't remember this exactly, but there is a 27-day lunar cycle. I can't remember exactly how it works. And there's a 28-day lunar cycle. It's a slightly different cycle measurement, but it's
yeah,
27, sure of it, because Jose
yeah.
Arguelles told me about it. I'll look into that.
Yeah. But it's just interesting, right? When I saw this, I realized that he knew this. Like I know he knew it, but I believe that they really did know it. And it was a time of worship. It was dedicated to Brahma. It was dedicated to God. It was a time of worship. So it was eclipses. I'm certain that that's what that nakshatra was and why it was masculine. There's no other way it could be masculine unless you're in an alignment. And then you get the heavenly body in that alignment that has the most power is going to dominate that alignment, right? Because it's a plasma stream, and that's how it flipped from feminine to masculine. So most of these megalithic sites, you can superimpose, whether it's Vedic or Babylonian astrology, right over top of these sites and see what they're trying to accomplish with all of these sites. So if you look at the ecliptic, and you can almost do this just manually when you start looking at the nodal points above and below the moon, Rahu and Ketu. There's always either Venus or Jupiter or Saturn or Mars, where you can almost manually see when an eclipse is going to happen if you're really a competent astronomer and you're watching the skies carefully. And with these devices, they just knew that much. They knew that much more, basically. So this astrology can just be superimposed right over top of the one in Armenia here. This is Stonehenge, and this is the one in Alberta. It's got exactly 28 rays radiating out from the center. The diameter is exactly the same as Stonehenge, and it's on 51 degrees latitude. How did they even find 51 degrees latitude 5,000 years ago on the Alberta prairie? Like, think about it. How did you go out there and find out to be exactly on 51 and be in a half a degree of that? It's like almost impossible unless you had really complex capabilities to do that. It's not that easy to do, right? It's a very difficult thing to do. And they did it. We did this in our past. So here's the trick. Let's see if I can just not have the writing right away. Is if you look, this is Stonehenge, and a lot of people try to say it was built in the 1950s. Auberry did a complete site survey of this, wrote a book on it, mapped it all out and found the Auberry holes. The Auberry holes are right around the outside of Stonehenge. And these holes, there's 56 of them. So 28 days in a month, double it, you get 56, right? And it's to give it more fidelity. It's like you get a little bit more fidelity by having those 56 holes. And it's an outie. Göbekli Tepe is an innie. This is an outie. Most of the megalithics are what I would call an outie. And Göbekli Tepe, the master one, is an innie. And I don't think they did other innies all around the world because it was too hard for the people to use them and understand them. This is a bit more simple. So if you can see, do you see the shadows coming all the way out to where the Auberry holes are? They were marking these holes with pigs. They had pigs to mark these positions all the time. And this is a true megalithic of memory. They built this so it would last forever. Whereas most of them are wood. There's a lot of wood ones. Like, we're finding wood ones all over Europe now. And imagine how many would be in the Sahara Desert, because that used to be all trees. And so we probably have these sites, these devices all over. I think we've only found about 5% of them. There's 95% still missing. There's a lot of these sites, and they were doing that high astronomy, and they can predict eclipses on these devices. So it's and it was interesting when they found the Auberry holes, they found one that had it was like some kind of big shin bone of an animal, and it had a leather sack with human remains in it. So they thought this is a burial site. But why would you create 58 holes perfectly synchronized around a circle to bury exactly 58 or 56 people, which is exactly twice the number of the lunar or of a lunar month, basically 28 days. And
Well, also
I think
the 56 holes, they could predict the 19-year lunar cycle also.
yeah, yeah. Well, you can do everything off them. You can really do some real and other astrology. Like, you can start tracking planets. You can do a lot of astrology on this device. But the interesting thing is that the about these 56 holes in this sack with the human remains is, I think it was kind of like a stupa where they take the remains of a lama or a high Rinpoche and they put it inside the stupa. it was kind of like a way of respect. They kept the ashes of that master of that site in the bag. It was kind of like a memory. I think, like, I don't think it was a exactly 56 holes to put dead people exactly around position. Like it was something more to remember past masters, is my guess. They probably had some really cool masters at all these sites at one time. I'm certain of it.
Probably.
So this is what Gerald Hawkins discovered, is he was able to figure out how they actually tracked solar and lunar eclipses with these peg holes. And how they did it is, if you got a picture that the Earth is the center of Stonehenge, and they moved on these Auberry holes, um, the marker for the sun every 13 days, two positions, and the marker for the moon every 2 day, or every day they moved it two positions. And when they come together, when they're in the same hole, like if the moon and the what, a solar eclipse is going to come. And Gerald Hawkins figured this out, and he used a supercomputer, but it was in the 1800. It was in the 1960s. So he would have had this iPhone would have had more power probably than the supercomputer he was using. So the modern scientists tried to make this guy look stupid, and it doesn't accurately predict eclipses. It's out a little bit, and they forgot how they use these devices. You just need to know a couple days in advance so you can play your mind out, do the practices, and prepare yourself. I think more playing the mind out and tiring yourself out is the key step, and Buddha left that clue, and so did Wei Nang. But they just needed to know roughly when they were coming. It didn't have to be this precision device that's going to work to an infinity for predicting eclipses. They just corrected it all the time. If they were out by a couple days, they would just do a sun position, reposition where the moon was, and just continue on. It was to get close. It wasn't to be, and if you wouldn't believe how ignorant modern scientists have been to Gerald Hawkins. He discovered something extremely important, and of course they try to run him down. But the crazy thing about this is, we did have a 2,000-year device called the Antikythera mechanism, that you can basically turn a little dial and get within the precision way beyond what this device could, and it's 2,000 years old. So why do we even have that device, let alone these devices? So Gerald Hawkins was a brilliant person to discover this, but they tried to make him look silly. They're trying to play down these sites. They're doing the same thing with Göbekli Tepe. They're trying to make it look like they kicked everybody off the site. They're trying to hide the true purpose of these sites, I believe, and dumb it down for everybody. So when a total lunar eclipse is happening, you just get the opposite thing. Your peg holes for the moon would be here, and the one for the sun, and you would know when the eclipse was or a total lunar eclipse was coming. And basically Stonehenge and Omak in Alberta are within a half a degree of 51 degrees latitude. And I said they'll find more. And 2 years ago, they found one in Tiel in the Netherlands, exactly on 51 degrees latitude. Exactly where I said, I think they're going to find 4 or 5, maybe 10 more on 51 degrees latitude. I'm certain of it. What would be really cool is if we found one in the southern hemisphere on 51 degrees, because all we got in the southern hemisphere is the Nazca lines and some strange stuff in South Africa that I haven't quite fit. They got these kind of devices in South Africa too, so there might be some other places that we find. And this is the one in Alberta. This is on the Alberta prairie. They didn't use carvings of megalithic rocks. They just piled up rocks in the center, and they made these 28 rays radiating out. And you see how the difference in the distance? I wonder if these are actually true Vedic astrology, where they're actually waiting till the constellation completes. But there's exactly 28 of them. And so what they do on Stonehenge, you could do the same thing on this site by just moving rocks at each one of these points. And you would do it only one point versus two positions for the moon and the sun, because you only got 28 versus 56. So this wouldn't be quite as accurate, but you would still be close enough to know you'd you'd have a week or two to prepare before the eclipse occurred. And that's what they were doing here. Pretty neat, eh? Like this is on the Alberta Prairie. Like this is a pretty big thing, but people just sort of gloss over and don't realize its significance. And I talked to this guy. He was actually quite. He was a chemical PhD, a chemist, and he was not a traditional archaeologist, so he was able to look at this with, and he saw the patterns right away. So this Gordon Freeman guy, they should put him on Göbekli Tepe as well, because the guy was a genius. When I talked to him, I knew right away I was talking to a genius, and I tried to dampen, because like I was saying, people flew in Vimanas there and built these, and so I was kind of going off on the deep end of who I thought built these. He kind of thought it was just nerds tracking the heavens, but I think he's wrong on that one. I think that this is one of those monuments of memory that they wanted us to figure out at this time as we come out of the dark age, so we can have a real golden age next time, and beyond with it. We can be an ascending planet finally, basically. And the other interesting thing about this one is it was built in 3100 BC. So we have the Mayan calendar, which started in 3114 BC, and we have this one built in 3100 BC, plus or minus 200 years. I think that they're monitoring the same time frames. And this is where I came up with my theory that if you plug in the Krishna number, Krishna departed in 3102 BC. If you take the Mayan calendar in this one, that's where you get the 2024, 2025 kind of time frame. That's when it ends. I don't know if we're not gonna suddenly, switch into 5 dimension next year or anything, but I think they were monitoring when we come out of the dark age. They were telling us that with these monuments, I believe. Now they have these all over the world. They got them in Egypt that are 7,000 Nabata Playa. So they were using these devices up in Egypt. They got them in Armenia that are 7,500 years old. They found them in Ireland and Scotland, a lot of these wood ones. The Nicholas and Helena Rorik, they found them all over Mongolia and Tibet. These devices are all over the world, and that one in Europe when the lake bed dried, they found one there. This one over here is in Armenia. They're everywhere. They found one in Spain, the one in Teal that was just found recently. That's a wood one. It's not a stone one. But the wood ones would be better for getting more accurate. If you have a straight pole in the sky, the shadow comes out. You get a little bit more precision with a wood one, but it's not a monument of memory. It doesn't last for 10,000 years. It's gone in 400 kind of thing, right? So, but there is a lot of wood ones. They're finding more and more of them. So I just want to go back to Sirius again, because this is where I think that Göbekli Tepe is leaving as a more important message. The monument is not just about how to predict eclipses, which it could. You can predict eclipses, but all of the stones face towards Sirius. So all of the stones at those sites all face towards Sirius. And you have to go, why would they do that? And here's the reason why I think, and this is where we're missing in astrology. If we don't really know about this binary system going, when you're an astrologer, the astrology is different at this point in a golden age than it is at this point. Because these two devices affected the astrology as well. So we need to have better astrology to understand this cycle. But there's a third motion that they talk about in the laws of Manu, and that's the 4.32 million year motion. And I believe it's with Sirius. And why I believe it's Sirius is it is different than all the other stars in our locale. It's 25 times more luminous than Beta Centauri, our sun, all the other ones. And that when Nicholas and Helena Rorik went all through Asia, they were taking a piece of the Chintamani stone back to Shambhala she actually describes it in her writings. It was about the size of a prune. It was a dried up looking thing. And you mentioned about they use it to communicate. She said that when enemies were approaching them because they were getting chased by bandits and all kinds of things when they went through Tibet and Mongolia, that the stone would creak. It would let them know it was actually making a sound. Like, so there's something more about this, and it comes from Sirius A. So the Chintamani stone that I believe was eventually originally in the Ark of the Covenant came from Sirius A. It's like some kind of alchemical, she even said that you couldn't approach it in anger. You had to take your time and slowly you couldn't even be near this little piece. They just had a piece of it. So there's something, and the White Lodge of the Great White Brotherhood is apparently around Sirius A. So I think if you just took Sirius out of our locale, we would be in potentially a really dark planet. Sirius is the most. So if you're doing ancient astrology at Göbekli Tepe, and you know a lot more than what we do now, the first thing that they consider when they're doing is where's Sirius? What's Sirius doing? Where's it in the sky? And then you do all the other stuff around that. Sirius was very important in these ancient astrologers. I really believe that. I think that we're misunderstanding. And even though you can have quantum entanglements with other stars, the luminosity and the closeness is also important. So you get more energy, more star power. It's a different type of star. This is an important star. It's the most important thing we should be considering in modern astrology, is my belief, is where Sirius is at. And I think that's why all the stones at Göbekli Tepe point in the direction where Sirius was 12,000 years ago. So back to this Buddha of Karahan Tepe, you see these pictures of modern archaeologists and stuff building or doing drawings of guys in loincloths. They look like basically Neanderthals standing there with spears, and one guy's got a bow, and they're standing around Göbekli Tepe. And you look at this guy. Does this look like a primitive? And he's got a aura around his head. He's a sage. This is not a king. There's no crown on his head. This guy's a sage. This guy was like probably a Buddha, maybe the third Buddha. This guy's really important, and he's leaving a clue what's really going on at this site. And I believe it's like what I told you about the Nalanda of India. There used to be a Buddhist site where it was a university. It had the biggest library. It was the best site for 1,000 years for any Buddhist pilgrimage or somebody who wanted to study Buddhism to go to. And I think that all of these megalithic sites all over Europe originated from this site, because the wood one they found in Teal is 4,000 years old. They found a bead from Iraq there. What is a bead from Iraq doing in Netherlands on one of these sites? It's because the technology originally came from this site. I believe all of the megaliths are somehow connected to this site. This is the mother lode of the sites. And I think this guy's a great sage that time forgot. He's dressed like a noble Roman, but this is 12,000 years before Rome existed. This is an old carving that illustrates everything. Because if they didn't have this aura around his head, it would mean nothing to me. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, I know what site was used for certain, and this is our clue. I'm sure modern scientists will say that they wore big seashells around their head because it was fashionable at the time. We'll get some silly, or they'll try to bury this again, or some silly explanation of what's going on here. But this isn't an enlightened being. This is a sage. So here's the thing now, is maybe when we're finished this, we'll go on to Google Earth and I'll show you how they use these both.
Well, I want to ask you, how many more slides are there?
probably only about 4 or 5.
You said there was 12, but we've gone through a lot more than 12.
Yeah, I threw in some of the old ones just to so people could. Yeah, there's not very many more, so we can probably get through this.
Let's kind of go fast because we're at an hour and a half already.
Okay, okay. So just to show you how they use this site is Göbekli Tepe is kind of on a mound, and so is Stonehenge, and so is the one in Alberta, where you can kind of look out over the horizon and see where the sun's dropping, where the stars are dropping. So it's a very good place to do astronomy, right? But it's an innie, it's not an outie. You see how this is slightly sloped upwards, and there's a groove right there. See that groove carved in the stone? In the center of Göbekli Tepe, in these monuments, they have tall stones sitting in the center, and the sun was hitting off this and touching the center stones. So they're not kind of going outwards like they do in all these other megaliths. They were doing it inwards. So they're doing the same thing, but just inwards rather than outwards.
Okay.
So to make these sites really work properly, you have to remove all of these stones. And a lot of people are saying it was buried by accident, and no, this thing was buried on purpose. And a lot of these stones, when they remove this stuff, they find more carvings. They wouldn't put a carving and then put all these stones. That makes no sense, right? They buried this, I'm certain of it, to preserve it for now, that we would find it and we would hopefully figure out what this device was used for.
Okay.
And this one's broken off, but you can see the grooves. You see how they're all pointing kind of down into the horizon? So when the sun's setting over on this side, the light would come through there and would hit these middle ones. So they're predicting eclipses on the inside versus the outside. And that's what they were doing on this site. So they were doing astronomy, and they could track the constellations. They could track where when an eclipse would be happening, and they could do all of basically astronomy in the same way that they can do on Stonehenge or the one in Teal, but they were doing it. This is a much more advanced site. So we talk about these 3 handbags. What I believe that this whole thing's saying right here is this is our perihelion buddy. This is our brown dwarf that came 13,000 and a half years ago. Exactly. It was in our, and the wing kind of, I think they're trying to say it comes back. This is a cyclic thing, people. And these 3 bags represent what the Maoris called. There's a story in the Maori tradition where one of their elders, was taken probably from the Anunnaki into the sky and given these 3 bags of wisdom. So what's in these 3 bags? I'll tell you exactly what I believe. Is bag number 1 is agriculture. And if you look just below where Karahan Tepe and Göbekli Tepe are, there's a huge lake bottom that would have been extremely fertile, because you can't have higher culture and higher enlightenment and all that if you're not growing grain and having a surplus. You can't be a hunter-gatherer just surviving on the cusp or right on the edge of survival all the time if you don't have agriculture.
What's the second bag?
Second bag is the teachings. This whatever their teachings were, but I'm gonna step out on a limb here and say you've just got them. Anybody want to know what the teachings were? I've just spent 3 episodes it would be the same teaching that Buddha had, the same teachings the Egyptians had, the same teachings I'm trying to share with you. They had the Dharma teachings in there. And the first bag, I believe, was this is where the astronomy, the astrology, how to build these devices, how to use these devices, the mathematics, all those other things that you kind of need to do this. So I believe that that's what the 3 bags represented. And then our star, this is Cancer. This guy comes up through Cancer repeatedly every 24,000 years. And I think it's a warning just to say, you need all this to be an advanced civilization, but this is repetitive. Like, this is going to happen again, kind of. I don't know for sure, but I think there's those 3 bags. These are in Indian art. These are in Mesoamerican art. They're the Vedic art. They're everywhere in the world. The Egyptian art have them. They always have these handbags. And sometimes you only see one or two, so maybe they only gave them this information. They didn't give them, like, I don't know for a fact, but that's what I believe it's for. And then this is the last slide. The Antikythera mechanism. This thing is like a Rolex watch. This is a 2,000-year device that can accurately predict eclipses to infinity. You could, if this thing was working, you could predict an eclipse, the March 14th eclipse, by just winding this thing. Why did we have a device like this, right? Like, there's a reason for it. They knew this. They knew this in their past.
Well, that was really very interesting.
So that's the last slide. I think that this revolution coming up, it's going to be artists, philosophers, alchemists, scientists. They're going to get this first this time. It's going to be interesting times. I have a lot of hope for the future. Actually, I think that if we can just get out of this bumpy point and get rid of the bullshit and get back into being truly spiritual beings and living like we should, that and I think we're going to get there. I don't see grip, like, it might be tough for a couple more years, but I think we're going to eventually get there.
I think that's a great place to end the program. On an up note like that, I want to thank you, Sheldon Moore, for your teachings. Very interesting. A lot of cross hatching with alchemy and Gnosticism and ancient Egypt. And it was great for you to bring that message to us. And I thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoyed the show.
Yeah, I did too. It was great. All right, everybody. Jay Weidner, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your interest in this subject. And I'll be back soon, I hope.